Hey guys, welcome back. Busy day today. Got something on my face there. Been tidying up my shop, putting away summer things, putting them to bed, and pulling out winter apparatuses, tools, equipment. I got about another weekend probably in the shop of just tidying up and moving things around. The winter is setting in. It's dark. It's about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and it's dark already. We had our time change here. So, anyhow, friends, I spent 2-3 hours today making yet another cylinder for my bad idea saw. My 288 top end with a 266 bottom end and a 066 Magnum. What I'm ending up is 78 cc's of vintage power saw. I'm putting all this in a playlist. If you want to start from the beginning, if you're just jumping in, I'm going to make a playlist out of all this. Anyhow, friends, I have a new cylinder that I made, and I keep making headroom in one direction and losing ground in the other, but I think this cylinder ought to work. Let's go to the bench and see where it's at. Okay, this is my new cylinder that I made today. This is the fourth cylinder that I've made in this series. I did a few things differently this time, and I'll let you know about that. But first, just get you guys a little bit lower here. Let's zero this thing, okay? Right there, 69. Hope you guys can see that. There we go, 69. Let's go back the other direction, and 69. Hope you guys can see that. It's always hard to film the pointer. There, right there, okay? 69 and 69. My wheel sure is wobbly today. That actually, I've never found that matters as long as you can recreate your numbers. Okay, so we'll take that out. Let's time the exhaust. I've already dropped this cylinder 200 plus thousandths. I've set my squish close. Everything's bolted down. I've drilled out the holes for the studs. A lot of work, friends. This has been fun, but it's definitely a lot of work. I'm going to get you guys set up, and we'll check the exhaust port and see where it lines up. Okay, I check my exhausts with a technique called first ray of light. Now, you guys can see there's light in the exhaust port right now. Okay, what I do is right there, okay? Open, close. Open, close. I hope you guys can see that. Okay? And I'll spin it around, top dead center. Just going to move the saw here out a little bit. Top dead center. Okay, and it should open somewhere. Okay, open, close. Okay, so it opens it right there. You guys can see that little tiny wee ray of light there. Where does it open at? I'm seeing 97. Right there. About 96, friends. Not what I'm after, but there's some room to move this thing around. Now let's do the intake. Here's the intake. Bottom dead center coming up. Right. We'll see there. And it looks like 70. So we're 96 on the exhaust, 70 on the intake. Let's have a look at the transfer. So 70 plus 70 is 140. So 140 degrees of duration. Now, this is a Farmer Tech cylinder. There's some good with that, a lot of bad. This cylinder was very, very out of round. I had to do a lot of work to get it squared away and then cut everything off the bore, okay? I'm not worried about the casting of the cylinder, I'm worried about the bore. But the bore was really off. with the base and the squish band, and everything was a little off on this saw. So I'm let's shed some more light on the situation here. There we go. There we go. Okay, here's our cylinder head. I have dropped it a little bit. Okay, I still haven't decided what I'm doing for a gasket, but realistically, friends, I might just try some good old ultra, or some copper, some Permatex copper high temp. That stuff will probably do what I need it to do. And I think I might just glue it together and see what happens. Can always cut things shorter for a head gasket. Okay, so this thing's stuck down. I did cut. Okay, here, where are we here? Right about there. We're at, these are short blowdown saws. I've done videos. Okay, these transfers are really ragged. Somewhere right about there is where they open. So yeah, 116. Here's my wheel. They open about right there. Okay, 116 after top at center. Okay, so that's where we're at. I did things a little bit different this time. I didn't cut this as thin, and now this iteration of my mock-up actually works pretty good, because the last one I had a tight spot at the bottom. Okay, this one's smooth. Okay, there's no movement, nothing grabs. That's why I went from cylinder number 2 to cylinder number 3. Now, this cylinder, I had a fin. The fin actually went down in here, so I had to go in there and machine away some of the decomp hole. Not what I wanted, but I didn't have a choice, friends, because there was a fin attached to this. So, I have enough thread in there. What I'm going to do is I'll take a decomp, cut it off, grind a groove into it, and I'll make it a flathead screwdriver, and then I'm going to taper it. Okay, and I'll taper it so that it seats, kind of like a jet in a carburetor. It'll seat tight against... It'll seat tight against that hole, okay? This is a used cylinder. It has been run. But yeah, basically, it'll seal itself against there and it won't leak. So I'm not worried about that. Yeah, I think this one's going to work. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, friends, is I'm going to go on my lathe and I'm going to machine this. The base of this is at... Base of this is at about, depending on where you measure, there you go. So I wanted to stop at 150 thousandths, and that's where I am. Notice I'm into the transfers, so I'll have to cut the bottoms of the transfers off again. I did machine, and by machine I mean I went in there with my Fordham, which is now fixed. I went in there with the Fordham and I actually ground it, okay? So that I didn't have to make it so thin. The last cylinder, I machined this too thin and it ended up warping, okay? So what I'll do is I'll chuck this up in my lathe, and I'm going to cut what I can off the bottom of this. Oh, that's going to be tight. I hope there's enough material here. I'm going to have to do this. That's what we're sealing to. Well, I'll try, friends. We'll see. I might need to order some more cylinders from Wolf Creek. Give me a second here. That's as far as we can go. I'm literally just touching the intake. So this thing's either going to be a leak-o-matic and it won't run, or it's going to run good. I cut about 50 thousandths off the base, and I also cut 50 thousandths off the cylinder where it protrudes, and I cut a taper on it because, well, this this case tapers in. So I thought rather than cutting my cylinder too small, or my, too short, because that's what I did on the last cylinder, thinking I could, I misjudged how far the piston goes into the case, and I ended up with too much piston protruding below the cylinder. The cylinder is 5,000 shy of the bottom of the case there. Okay, so I might relieve it a little bit more. But again, these are all little things we can do. After. Just gotta make sure this is centered. Again, if the part that protrudes into the case is too big, or it's an interference fit, what ends up happening is your piston won't move freely in there. You'll actually squish it. I've had that happen many times. So it's really important to have a 90-degree break from the base to the part that goes in. If you have a little couple thousandths little bump there, you'll end up with a saw that doesn't turn over, or a cylinder that won't, or a piston that doesn't turn all the way. Okay, let's see. Now we're at 68 and a half, and 68 and a half. 65, 67, 67 and a half. We were at 70. You guys picking up what I'm throwing down? 68 and a half. Okay, so by lowering the cylinder, we change the timing, right? Well, we change the relation of this to the top of the piston. Okay, we actually lowered everything. Okay, let's turn our lights off here and let's time the exhaust. Okay, I got you guys a little closer. So remember, the cylinder is lower, so the exhaust roof is lower. So therefore, we'll go to top dead center. I should have a lower exhaust roof. I don't want 96 unless I have to. If I have to live life like that, then so be it. I don't have a taller piston. I'm seeing 100, friends. Okay, and we'll close it. Well, I'm seeing 100 now. 101. Wow. I'll show you guys the marker. And I'll turn it around and I'll watch, and you guys can watch the pointer. It opens right about there. 101 after top dead center. Oh, we got something now. Okay. And again, my squish is probably about where I want it now. We'll check that after. Intake timing. This piston is not cut. I can set my timing based on that. Okay, so we're about right there. I'm seeing it at about 74. So 74 and 74 is 148. I think that's exactly where I should run this. Can always give it more timing. I don't want to have to give it less. Okay, so we're 101. Opens right there. 74. There's my pointer. Okay. Now remember, blowdown does not change. It'll change where it opens, but its relation to the exhaust should not change. Unless, depending on your rod ratio, okay, a longer rod, same stroke, but a longer rod will move the piston differently than a shorter rod. Okay, piston speed changes with different rod lengths. I thought about changing the rod ratio on this saw, not so much stroking it, but putting a longer rod. But I'm not sure if I'll notice enough of a difference. There's our squish now. Okay, let's have a look. Where does that open? Right about there. 123. Okay. So we're 101, 123. And we were 96, 115. So 20, let's see, 101 and just making sure, friends. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. Right about there. 120 is what I'm seeing. 101 and 120. So 19 degrees of blowdown. This is hard to measure, friends. These transfers are jagged. I'm going to have to go in there and clean these up. So we're probably going to lose about a degree. 121 is what I'm seeing. And my exhaust opens at 101. So I have 20 degrees of blowdown. I had 96 and 15 is what I was seeing before. So 96 and 15 is 19 degrees of blowdown. So we're probably roughly where we were. But remember, we're at a different part of the stroke now because we've lowered the cylinder. We may get more or less movement based on that. Okay, now last thing I want to check. I think we're about ready to start putting this thing together, friends. Other than that decomp, but again, I can make something that'll fit in there. Put some glue on it, and that should be fine. I'll have to really, really glue the bottom of this cylinder in because I'm worried about it leaking, friends. I really am. We're going to make a lot of case pressure. And I know it can be done, but a bigger piston displaces more air, and it's going to pressurize this case a little bit more. It's the other reason why I don't want too much intake timing. But again, this saw may run better with more intake timing because I could end up with less vacuum on the case if I open it sooner. But I want to see what more vacuum does first. Okay, and again, we are not at zero squish. Let's grab this. I don't know how tight this is. I may have to get... Well, actually, friends, we can... we'll just use what we have here. Okay, push this in there. I'm going to check this one all four corners to make sure my machine work is decent, right? My machine's old. My lathe is a 1950 Colchester. It does have slop in it. I've had that machine for 13 years, so it's 28 thousandths. Okay, so if I put some silicone on here to glue this thing down. High temp silicone is good for like 1500 degrees. I'll bet you it'll glue this. Harder to take apart, more work, but I think likely I'm going to go that route. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Sorry, friends. My wife was calling me there. So we're bang on 28 thousandths. That's better. That's better than a normal cylinder would be. Okay, because I've machined this, it's perfectly straight. Because I zeroed out the bore. Okay. I'll use a dial indicator on the bore, and I will dial in the bore with... Okay, so we're half a 10,000th out, more than acceptable for a lathe that old. Okay, so all I have to do now, friends, is take this. There's two ways I can do this. I think I'm going to glue it first, because gluing it first means I don't have to remachine anything. Okay, I will cut, what, 28. I'll have 2 to 3 thou of silicone in there when I glue it. So likely what I'll do is I'll cut my 28 down to... I gotta relieve those holes too. I'll cut this down to... I'll cut 5 to 6 thousandths off this. Okay, I'll have my squish at about 25. If that doesn't work, well, I will order some copper or brass Even aluminum, even tin would work, friends. Maybe I'll use tin. I am the tin man. I know a guy. I know where I can get tin of various thicknesses. I'll make a gasket and I can put it here and then put my cylinder on and crank it down and it should seal like that. Okay. The base now, all I have to do with this. Oh, this thing fits in there real tight. That's strange. It's the it's not the cylinder, friends. It's the studs. I gotta. There we go. Okay, my base. Let's move this over. My base. I will likely just cut these out. Okay, and then we're done. I'm not even. All I'm going to do is do a little bit of machine work, a little bit of grinding to the piston. We will run that as it is because it's stock. Exhaust, I will leave at 101 because, well, this thing will probably be fairly nasty. I'll do some flow work to this piston right here. I'll do some flow work to this piston to make it a little bit lighter. And to make sure that we're getting good transfers. And likely we can just leave this exhaust port. And the intake, friends, I'm going to leave it as it is at, what are we? We are we are 101 on the exhaust. We are 120 on the transfer, so 19 degrees of blowdown. And my intake timing is 148. Well, I think we're going to leave it like that. This thing is paper thin now, friends. It should be 1/10 of an inch. Okay. And I did that. I did not measure, friends. I did it with the dials. And the dials on my old lathe, well, they're 10 thousandth out. Okay, we're 99 thousandths. I was aiming for 100 thousandths. Okay, so, and again, the reason why I redid this is I needed a new cylinder because my piston was coming out like this on the last one. Okay, and I don't like that. I think it's still coming out a little bit, but it's not hitting, right? The problem is, friends, I can't put this in any farther into the case, okay? Into my case. You guys can see I relieved it here and there. I can't shove this down into my case any farther. And the problem is the piston skirt is so long, and just the way just the way the ports line up, friends, I need that extra piston skirt length or I'm going to end up with too much intake timing. Does that make sense? So this piston does still come out to about here, but it was like this on the last one. It may bind up and break the bottom of this piston. The problem is, friends, I don't want to cut that much off. That's the thing with these kinds of projects. You're really, you got to just play it by ear. I went for more exhaust, okay, or less exhaust timing on this versus more intake timing. I could have left it at 96 and then cut my piston down, okay, but I don't want to do that because I don't want too much intake timing on this. To me, intake timing is going to be the problem on this, not exhaust timing, okay? So the way this saw is, this thing should be a monster, okay? Hopefully, or it's going to run horribly and we're all going to laugh together, but either way, I'm going to put whatever I do on this channel. Okay, guys, so next step on this, I know everything fits, everything works. Next step on this week, we will build a new bottom end for this. I got to find a clutch. I got to dig through my part stash. I need a clutch for this saw. I'm going to give this crank a good bath because likely there is particulate in there. Friends, there was no way to really do this other than to grind it with the crank in, which I would never do, but didn't really have a choice because, well, I need this all together so that I can set everything up. I need the piston in there and the crank in so that I can slide this down and know that it's going to fit properly, if that makes sense. So, and I mean, likely we can take And yeah, friends, I'm looking right now. So the bottom of this cylinder is touching. It's just above the case. So, well, it is what it is, right? There's really nothing we can do. As long as the piston doesn't hit the crankshaft. Okay. The crankshaft lobes is, remember, when this thing's going all the way down, it could bottom out. So that's why when you're doing something like this, you want to spin it around and around and just make sure. And try and accurately predict how much distance you have, because at bottom dead center, when everything swells, you could end up with contact that you don't have cold when this thing's hot. Okay, I think we got something here. This will be either the world's greatest waste of time or it's going to run good. We won't know until this week when we build the bottom end. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging out here and watching me go through the trials and tribulations of this project. I think we got something here. I think this saw is going to work. I don't know how it's going to run, but for sure we should be able to get it running. I'm worried about air leaks, friends. There's a lot of thin spots in the case, and so I got to make sure I put a lot of glue on this thing so that, well, there's no leaks anywhere. But other than that, I think it's going to work. Whether we need a bigger carburetor or a smaller one, or whether our intake timing is long enough, we won't know until we run it. Anyhow, friends, thanks for watching. Take her easy. Later.